Bill Russell. Unfortunately, we have lost some very important people here in this week in the black community specifically, but in America in general. These are American icons. These aren't just black icons. These weren't just people who were products of their race. They were important figures in the history of American popular culture in general. And I'm talking about, of course, first and foremost, Bill Russell, who was the winningest player in the history of the NBA, the winningest player in the history of team sports. He won 11 championships in 13 years as a player. He won the very last title he won with the Boston Celtics. He won as a player coach. He redefined how basketball was played. He changed the way sports was viewed in such a racially divided country in the 1950s and 60s. He was the most prolific winner in NBA history. This is a man who marched with Martin Luther King Jr., stood with Muhammad Ali, and received the Presidential Medal of Freedom from Barack Obama, another person we will talk about later on in the show. He was the centerpiece of the Boston Celtics dynasty that won 11 championships in 13 years. Oh, I'm sorry, he won his last 2 titles as a player coach. So he actually won his last 2 titles. So 2 of the 13 were won as a player coach. He was the first black coach in any American sport, major U.S. sport. He died on Sunday at the age of 88 with his wife Janine at his side. His family has said in a statement that was posted on social media, no cause of death was immediately available. Russell, who had been living in the Seattle area, was not well enough to present the NBA Finals MVP trophy in June due to a long illness. I was wondering about that. I know they were very reticent to have him in the bubble when the NBA had the bubble in 2020, and I thought maybe they were just leaving him out of it again because he was they were protecting him. You know, we're still in the middle of a pandemic on some level, but now we see that it was because he was ill. He was a Hall of Famer, a 5-time MVP, and a 12-time NBA All-Star, who in 1980 was voted the greatest player in NBA history by basketball writers. He remains the sport's most decorated champion. He also won 2 college titles at San Francisco and an Olympic gold medal. He was the archetype of selfishness who won with defense and rebounding while others racked up gaudy scoring totals. Often that meant Wilt Chamberlain, the only worthy rival of Russell's era, and his prime competition for rebounds, MVP trophies, and barroom arguments about who was better. Chamberlain, who died in 1999 at 63, had twice as many points, 4 MVP trophies of his own, and is the only person in league history to grab more rebounds than Bill Russell. But Russell dominated in the stat that he cared about, which was 11 championship rings to Wilt Chamberlain's 2. Now, let me just provide some context to that. As a hoop fan, okay, I love Bill Russell, but Wilt Chamberlain is the most dominant athlete in the history of the NBA. Okay? Love or hate Wilt Chamberlain, this is a man who scored 100 points in a single game, who averaged 50 points per game for an entire season. 50 points a game for an 82-game season. Think about that. Okay, the next highest total in the NBA history, not by Wilt Chamberlain, was by Michael Jordan, who averaged 37 points a game for an entire season. So, I mean, I was a very small child when Michael Jordan was playing, but Jordan averaged 37 a game. Chamberlain averaged 50 a game. Okay? I think, don't get me wrong, Bill Russell was an all-time great player, maybe the greatest defender and rebounder ever. But if we're talking about sheer statistical dominance, you got to go with Wilt Chamberlain. He definitely was up there himself. And Bill Russell was the ultimate teammate. He was the ultimate coalition builder. He played with 8 or 9 other Hall of Fame players on Boston at a time when maybe there were 20, 25 great players in the NBA total. He had about 7 or 8 of them on his team. On top of that, he had the greatest coach ever in Red Auerbach, a man who I still believe is the greatest coach, maybe Popovich in NBA history as well. Bill Russell was the facilitator. He was the stir that stirred the. He was the straw that stirred the drink. I think that's the saying right there. That's what Bill Russell was to those Boston Celtics team. Now, in a statement released by the White House, President Joe Biden praised Bill Russell for his lifelong work in civil rights as well as sports and called him a towering champion for justice and freedom. He definitely was that. He said he was one of the greatest athletes in our history, an all-time champion and a good man and a great American who did everything he could to deliver the promise of America for all Americans. Reactions poured in from Barack Obama to Michael Jordan to Magic Johnson to even Boston's mayor, Michelle Wu. She said, "Today we lost a giant." Barack Obama said, "Today we lost a giant." As tall as Bill Russell stood, his legacy rises far higher, both as a player and as a person. Perhaps more than anyone else, Bill knew what it took to win and what it took to lead. Amen to that. Bill Russell is arguably the greatest leader in the history of American team sports. I think that's pretty undeniable. Nobody had the type of team success that he had in any sport. This is a man who was born in the Deep South in Louisiana and moved to California as a youngster and spent his entire life fighting for justice for not only his people, but for the world's people. He was at the March on Washington in 1963 when Dr. Martin Luther King gave his I Have a Dream speech. He was one of the people who backed Muhammad Ali and was there for Muhammad Ali when Ali was pilloried for refusing induction into the military draft. That's why Barack Obama gave him the Medal of Freedom alongside John Lewis and some other people who I think are not as great, namely Warren Buffett and Angela Merkel. But, it's important to appreciate people like Bill Russell because, there's a lot of great athletes today. People like LeBron James who do speak up against injustice in this country and in this world. But you have to understand that the consequences for Bill Russell was just so much more, so much heavier. This was a man who in Boston, they broke into his house while he was winning all those championships for their team. And because he moved into a neighborhood that was white at the time, they broke into his house and they smeared feces on the walls and broke his trophies. This was their hero they did this to. A man who wore their colors, who represented their city. They broke into his house, smeared feces on the wall, and broke his things. He underwent horrific harassment by people in the city he was playing for. So you can only imagine the type of abuse he got in cities that weren't Boston from opposing fans. You could only imagine what he went through when he was supporting Muhammad Ali and speaking out about civil rights as a prominent black man in the 1960s. I mean, when you hear LeBron James speak out about things now, when you hear LeBron James speak out about things now, he gets pilloried. The right wing media hates LeBron James. Serena Williams too. So just imagine what it was like for Bill Russell in 1965 or something. So rest in peace to Mr. Bill Russell, the greatest winner in the history of professional team sports, and somebody who is very much worthy of all of our adulation and every honor in the world you could think of. Rest in peace to him. My prayers go out to his family and everybody who knew him, and just to this world for losing somebody like him. And unfortunately, they say death comes in threes. Right now we got two. Unfortunately, Bill Russell wasn't the only person who passed away over the weekend. Nichelle Nichols, who broke barriers for black women in Hollywood as communications officer, Lieutenant Uhura on the original Star Trek television series, has died at the age of 89. Her son, Kyle Johnson, said that she died on Saturday in Silver City, New Mexico. Now, her role on the 1966 through 1969 series, wow, I didn't know Star Trek was only on for 3 years? Really? Wow. Her role in the 1966 through 69 series earned Nichols a lifelong position of honor with the series' rabid fans known as Trekkers and Trekkies. It earned her accolades for breaking stereotypes that had limited black women to acting roles as servants and included an interracial on-screen kiss with co-star William Shatner. That was unheard of at that time. Now, William Shatner tweeted on Sunday, that he was sorry to hear about her passing. He said she was a beautiful woman and played an admirable character that did so much for redefining social issues both here in the United States and around the world. Now, George Takei, who shared the bridge of the USS Enterprise with her as Sulu in the original Star Trek series, called her trailblazing and incomparable. He said that for today, his heart was heavy, his eyes shining like the stars. You now rest among his dear friend. That's what he tweeted. And now her impact was felt far beyond her immediate co-stars and many others in the Star Trek world. A lot of those people also tweeted their condolences. And it's important to understand that when the original Star Trek premiered in 1966, its multicultural, multiracial cast was Gene Roddenberry's message to viewers that in the far-off future, the 23rd century, human diversity would be fully accepted. My personal favorite story about Nichelle Nichols was how Martin Luther King was a huge Trekkie and praised her role. And she said that she actually met him at a civil rights gathering in 1967 at a time when she had decided not to return for the show's second season. Now, she tells Dr. King that she was going to miss her co-stars, but she was leaving the show. And she said at this point he became very serious and said, "You can't do that. You've changed the face of television forever, and therefore you've changed the minds of people," she said Dr. King told her. She said that foresight that Dr. King had was a lightning bolt in her life. Wow. Now, during the show's third season, her character and William Shatner's Captain James T. Kirk shared what was described as the first interracial kiss to be broadcast on a U.S. television series. In the episode Plato's Stepchildren, their characters, who had always maintained a platonic relationship, were forced into the kiss by aliens who were controlling their actions. Now, the TV people were concerned about reactions from Southern television stations. So showrunners wanted to film a second take of the scene where the kiss happened off screen, but Nichols said in her book that she and Shatner deliberately flubbed lines to force the original take to be aired. Wow. Despite their concerns, the episode aired without blowback. In fact, it got the most fan mail that Paramount Pictures had ever gotten on Star Trek for one episode, she said in a 2010 interview with the Archive of American Television. This was a woman who had a very extraordinary life even beyond Star Trek. She first worked professionally as a singer and dancer in Chicago at age 14. She started at 14 years old. She moved on to New York nightclubs and worked for a time with Duke Ellington and Lionel Hampton bands before coming to Hollywood for her film debut in 1959's Porgy and Bess, the first of several small film and TV roles that led up to her Star Trek stardom. She was known for being afraid to stand up to William Shatner on the set when others complained that he was stealing scenes and camera time, because we all know that the Shat was a big camera hog. They later learned that she had a strong supporter in the show's creator. Another fan was future astronaut Mae Jemison, who became the very first black woman in space when she flew above the shuttle Endeavour in 1992. In an AP interview before her flight, Jemison said that she used to watch Nichols on Star Trek all the time, adding that she loved the show, and she actually got to meet Nichelle Nichols at some point. She was a regular at Star Trek conventions and events until her 80s, but her schedule became limited starting in 2018 when her son announced that she was suffering from advanced dementia. She was placed under a court conservatorship in the control of her son, Kyle Johnson, who said that her mental decline made her unable to manage her affairs or make public appearances. Now, here's the controversy here. Now, some, including her managers and friend, film producer, and actress Angelique Fawcett, objected to the conservatorship and sought more access to Nichols records of Johnson's financial and other moves on her behalf. Her name was at times invoked at courthouse rallies that sought the freeing of Britney Spears from her own conservatorship, but the courts usually sided with Johnson, and over the objections of her friends and management allowed him to move her to New Mexico, where she passed away. And so this is why you have a living will, folks. This is why you make a will, and this is why you make a living will as well. There is a lot of messiness that comes at the end of life at times. And, this is a woman who lived a very exemplary life and, deserved to pass away with some dignity. So rest in peace to both Bill Russell and Nichelle Nichols. Godspeed. We'll be right back. Issues and Answers.